Hi everyone, this is Jacqui Cooper with J. Cooper Travels, and today I have a really special guest. Greg is here today, and he's going to be talking about a lot of technical things and publishing and things that we as business people need to know about. But before I get over to our conversation of the day, I want, for those that are new to J. Cooper Travels, I wanted just to kind of give a quick background as to who I am and what the purpose of the podcast is all about. And definitely be sure to hit subscribe and like to the bottom and also to the YouTube as well, because I have a variety of guests on that talk about travel, both geographically as well as how to travel in your own personal life, through your career, through your health, through your finance, and more. And my background, I'm an attorney, but I'm also an educator and I'm also an entrepreneur. And that's how I connected with Greg, because we're both on LinkedIn. And I was networking and I saw that he had a very interesting business involved in the publishing area and technology. And Greg, welcome today. How are you doing?
I'm well, Jackie. Thanks so much for having me on.
Sure. So I haven't really fully explained everything that your business does. So why don't you go ahead and share the name of your business as well as how people can reach out to you. I will have that information for those that are listening in the block below the podcast and YouTube, and we will repeat it again in case you're traveling and listening and can't write it down right away. But why don't you share a little bit more about your business and what your focus is?
Sure. So I've been in publishing for my entire career. And most of what I've done, I started off in editorial, spent a lot of years as an editor and working on various publications. But eventually I moved into the technical side of things. Back when the internet started going as an opportunity for publishers, I got very involved with some early tax products and other internet products. So I moved more into the technology side of publishing. My company is just called Krehbiel Group. My website is krehbielgroup.com. And what I do is I help publishers who are having problems with technology issues that might be related to their email system, their back-end fulfillment. Fulfillment means, for example, when you send out renewal notices, or how you send out your product, or how you update people's subscriptions, that sort of thing. Or interactions between a website and the back end with the fulfillment system to make sure the right people are getting access to content, that sort of thing. What I've been focusing on most recently is something called a customer data platform. And a customer data platform is an interesting kind of technology. It, generally speaking, does two things. It tries to unify all your customer data into one place. Like, for example, you might have customer data in Salesforce, or you might have customer data in your email system. You also collect an enormous amount of information over your website, but most people don't really do anything with that. All the times that someone's clicking on your website, they're telling you things about themselves, what they're interested in, how much time they spend on a certain page. When they go from one page, what do they go to next? The customer data platform unifies all those things, all your information about your customer, and allows you to create a better view of your customer so that you can personalize their experience on the website. So if they're more interested in retirement, you show them more about retirement. Or in your case, if people are more interested in finances, you show them more about finances. So it allows you to make your website more relevant to the visitors. So that's my main focus recently.
That's really important, because as everyone is is looking at, there are always going to be brick and mortar businesses, but even with the brick and mortar, we're looking at how do we create an online presence and how to make it more responsive as markets change, as your clients change, as your visitors change. So that's really, really critical. Now, for those that are listening, they might not know how to spell your last name. So how would you spell your last name so that way they could find you?
Sure, it's Krehb as in boy, IEL.
Okay, great.
So what you mentioned about brick and mortar is actually very interesting, because customer data platforms can also incorporate information from brick and mortar stores. So you can take the information you're getting from in-store transactions and then merge that together. Like Walmart or somebody like that is certainly they have a profile on customers. It's not just what you do on their website, but also what you do in your store.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, as you said, it's all about the data collection, and then how can we incorporate the information on what our customers need so we can better serve them. Because if we can't serve them, then they're going to go to someone else who might actually want who can provide the same service, but just in a way that feels more responsive.
That's right.
So I know that, you have, you're multi-talented, and you have been also writing different articles. We were talking offline about a particular article that you thought might be a good startup point. And then also for those that are listening, because Greg is a prolific writer, and as well as an analyst and a coach, we're going to be doing a series about his various articles. So that way each topic might be a separate podcast. So that's why you definitely want to subscribe and like, so that way you can keep in contact with how this might help you in your business. And don't forget, reach out to him, because he's here to consult, to look at your technology and the operations, and also fulfillment. So what was the article that you were thinking that might be good as a kickoff for sharing?
Yeah, so one thing, when people are trying to figure out whether a technology works for them, typically they might write a request for proposals to send out to different companies, or just a requirement statement. In our email system, we need our email system to do these 5 things. And then they'll end up talking to 4 or 5 different vendors, or however many, to find out which one fits best, both in terms of whether it meets their requirements, but in terms of money, and in terms of cultural fit and other things, to pick a vendor. One of the things that comes up is sometimes a vendor will say, we don't do that. And a lot of times that's the end of the conversation. Like, just for example, I used to work for a company that liked to attach PDFs to the emails that they would send out. And you would talk to the email company and they would say, well, we don't do that. Sometimes the problem is the opposite. They say they do it, and it turns out that they really don't. But in this particular article, I was addressing what happens when somebody says they don't do it. And I think there's 5 things you can look at. One is, I didn't understand what you were asking for. That's the most common, because usually technical issues are hard to explain, and there's a lot of jargon. And you need to get past the jargon, so people are actually speaking in simple sentences and understanding one another. And so the first thing to do is to make sure you're really understanding both sides. The vendor's understanding what the potential client's saying, and the potential client understands what the vendor's saying, because the vendor's going to be speaking from their own set of jargon and their point of view, and the client the same way. The next thing you might hear is, it's outside our scope. Now, there's a couple things to think about here. There are some technologies that try to be what's called best of breed. They only do one thing, and they say, all we do is we send emails, and we send emails really, really well. And then you have another technology that tries to be more like a Swiss Army knife. It tries to have a whole bunch of different functions, right? And if you think about a Swiss Army knife, no tool in a Swiss Army knife is the best, right? It's not the best knife, it's not the best can opener, it's not the best corkscrew, but it's the corkscrew that you have, right? So in that respect, it's really nice. In either one of these cases, a particular request from a client can be out of scope of what they're looking at. And that provides some interesting opportunity as well. Because on the one hand, the vendor might decide, well, enough people have asked for this, we should start building it, right? And that's a great place for a client to be, to get on the ground floor and have their particular requirements. As long as you're not pressed for time, if you have the time to go through the development, then you can have your requirements built in from the ground floor of how this company is going to deal with that issue. So that's a really great opportunity, both for the vendor and for the client. Another thing that comes up from time to time is they'll say, kind of following up on that, they'll say, we're working on it. And once again, that creates a good opportunity for the vendor and for the client, because if they're working on it, then you can try to make sure that they're doing it in a direction that will help you. Now, once again, the really crucial thing about these kinds of communications is to make sure that you're communicating clearly. I was in a situation one time where we weren't allowed to communicate directly with the developers. We had to communicate with a rep, and the rep went and communicated with the developers. And because of that, they ended up building something that was not what we wanted. So it's really good to be able to have somebody who can serve as a technical liaison to get in there and actually speak with the developers and make sure it's doing what you think it's going to do. Another possible reason a vendor might say that they don't do that is they think it's the wrong approach. And sometimes there are things that are just matters of opinion. Like, for example, the example I said about attaching PDFs. Some email service providers think that's a bad idea, so they don't do it, and others are willing to do it. So sometimes it's a matter of approach, and you're not going to change the vendor by telling them, well, we want to do it this way. But it provides the vendor an opportunity to be an actual partner and say, well, we don't do that, but here are some other companies that do. And they lose that business right then, but then they become somebody that you think back on them fondly and you think, hey, these are good guys. They weren't only trying to promote themselves. And then the last reason that someone might do something is they say it's illegal. And that comes up particularly with privacy issues. And that's a big issue with customer data platforms. And they're, for example, in the European Union, they have rules on privacy that don't necessarily apply in the United States. California has some strict privacy rules that American companies should comply with if they want to do business in California. So that's also an important thing. If a vendor tells you something is illegal, you really need to check and make sure what you're doing is okay. The vendor might be wrong, or it might be a jurisdictional problem where they're talking about Europe and you're talking about America, just as an example. But it's a good opportunity to clarify things and make sure that you're doing what you should be doing.
Now, all those are areas that I had never even thought about. When you talk about cross jurisdictions, and then also the role of different communication styles, and then also sometimes the short term, I don't want to say loss, because when you are not working with someone, it's not necessarily a loss because they might come back around and work with you on a different project. So it just might not be a current situation that's going on because you still have that connection. There was another area that we haven't really talked about a lot, and that was the fulfillment area. Can you explain a little bit more about how you support that?
Sure. So fulfillment is the necessary thing that every publisher needs, and almost every publisher can't stand fulfillment because it's very complicated. And you think a matter of just sending out the January issue to all the people who are supposed to get the January issue. It sounds like it should be a very simple thing, but it never is, because there are questions of people being in a grace period, like their subscription has ended, but they're still allowed a couple of months before their payment comes in. You have problems of when somebody comes in on one rate, so subscription rate, and someone else comes in on another subscription rate, and when you're going to renew them, which rate do you renew them at? You have questions of if they change from print to digital or print and digital, if they change over from being in your print subscription category to being now they're going to read it on iPad or something like that. So there are all these details that get incredibly complicated. And I've been in 3 situations where we've had to move fulfillment vendors from one to another. And you sit down with the other guys, the people from the fulfillment vendor, and you talk and you talk and you talk for days. And I mean, literally 3 or 4 days. You think you've talked about everything you could possibly talk about. And then when it comes time to implement it, you end up saying, wait, you do what? It's amazing. It's amazing how, despite all your best efforts to do your due diligence and find out exactly what their system does, you find out your system is off from 1 in the morning till 2 in the morning so you can do backups. Well, what if somebody's online at that time? You find these weird things that you never thought to ask, but they come out. So when you're dealing with a really large technology issue like that, it's important to be like Lieutenant Columbo. Remember Columbo in the old TV movies? He would always say, one more thing, just one more thing. Keep asking questions and keep probing and ask the question a different way and then ask it a different way. And you'll make yourself a pain, but you'll also get the answers that you need to make the correct decision. So fulfillment is the bread and butter of a publishing company. and it's very difficult, but I have a lot, unfortunately, have a lot of experience with it. It's the kind of thing that you have to dig into very carefully. And I've had to do that several times as I've been with companies that have moved from one fulfillment company to another.
Well, the reason why and I'm not in publishing, but the reason why, as an outsider, I think that that's so critical is just like you said. The market does change, so prices change. Sometimes you're offering a 2-year subscription or a 5-year subscription because you want to keep the client longer. And then just like you said, you might have different packages. And so you have to figure out, how do you logistically in the computer make sure that you, one, are billing correctly, and 2, answering people's questions. And if they call in for customer service, you're not giving them the wrong information based upon the information in the platform.
Yes.
And then also giving them the product that they want. So, I mean, we all have, when we start our business, we all have an idealized idea as to what our product is. But then we have our customer needs, which is a layer of that. And then we also have, like you said, the fulfillment part of the product to the customer, and then the profit part, which is to us, because if we don't profit, then we can't provide the service or the object to the customer.
Yes.
So it's like one continuous cycle. So what you were saying is really critical and very complicated, not easy.
No, it's not easy. And the points you raised about having different offers, you might have a 2-year subscription, a 5-year subscription. It might be a matter of, on a particular offer, when you renew, you get this special giveaway. Well, how does the system know who gets that giveaway? And have you made sure that everybody that was supposed to get it got it?
Yep.
There are a lot of different little details that are difficult to work through. And typically what happens is you have this clash between the marketers who want to try different offers and different ideas, and they have all these great, well, what if we tried this and what if we tried this? And then the systems people trying to think, well, how am I going to make that happen in the computer program that I have, right? So you have a real, I know this is neurologically wrong, but the left brain, right brain kind of a conflict. And that's why somebody like me, not to brag, but that's what I do, is I sort of sit between the marketing people and the technical people and try to communicate across that gap to make sure that the technical people understand what the marketing people want and vice versa. And that's been a big part of my career, is just being that liaison between those two different mindsets.
Yeah, no, that bridge is critical. I know that being in the travel space, I've learned that I can definitely help individuals book and plan their own trips. But I also know that I have access to, which for those that are listening, you'll have access to it. It's free. It's a wholesale member booking platform. And everyone can save up to 35% when they book themselves. That's a lot less than when I am planning a trip, even though I do get paid through commissions. The commissions that I get paid from the wholesale booking platform is built in with discounts. So again, different module, same product, travel. And, again, it could be the same customer looking at 2 different things and then asking, well, why is your cost higher on this platform versus that platform? And it just is a different model. So yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. It can be a little bit confusing for the customer. And then also as a business person, it's something we have to think about. So talking about travel, I always like to kind of weave that in. And I know we're gonna have more than one conversation because you're so experienced in this whole area. But we always talk about places that we want to go, bucket lists. I know you mentioned that there's a place that I haven't been to yet. I'm looking forward. So do you want to share the place that you've been to that you would like to go back to?
Sure. So for our 20th wedding anniversary, we went to St. Lucia, and that was a blast. And it's a lovely little island, and it's pretty far south. Look up how to get to St. Lucia. We flew into Puerto Rico and then went to St. Lucia. And it's a small island, and it's very poor. And there are areas where there are the resorts, which are fantastic. And then you get on a bus to travel down to the capital, the Castries, and you go through these areas that are so poor that someone would have something that you might not want to put your lawnmower in your backyard. That's what they live in. And it's a huge contrast there, but it's also a very interesting place, very beautiful. My favorite experience at St. Lucia was we took this catamaran trip. Where we were staying was on the northwest edge of the island. And we took a catamaran trip down to the southwest edge of the island, and we saw a volcano and a place where they process chocolate and a waterfall and a bunch of other interesting things. But then on the way back up north, a storm set in, and this catamaran had this big net across the bow, and everybody would just lounge out there. On the way down, it was all smooth sailing. Everything was easy. Everybody sitting there with their rum punch in the front of the bow of the catamaran. And then on the way back north, this big storm hit, and everybody came inside except me. I went up to as far as I could get up there and kind of wrapped my arms and my legs into the net and had the water splashing all over me on the way back up. It was phenomenal. I loved it. And then once the storm calmed down, we went to this fish sanctuary, which was like a zoo, but outside. And
Wow.
you could, when you got out of the boat, the locals would come up and rent you masks and snorkels and flippers. And you could swim around and these enormous, beautiful fish just right there, right at your feet. So that was all very fun. We had a lot of fun adventures while we were there, but that was the one that really sticks out to me.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So for those that are listening, definitely check out the I Go for Less platform that I'm going to share with you, because they do have resorts and excursions to St. Lucia as well as other locations, and it is free to register, so that way you can enjoy discounts. Greg, thank you so much for being on here. Any last minute thoughts that you want to share with those that have been listening in terms of how you can help them, or any other last minute thoughts? I know we're going to have more than one conversation.
Sure. So just go to KrehbielGroup.com. That's KREHBIEL group.com. And I have a newsletter that I send out once a month. They could sign up for that, or just look at the things that I write on that page. And if you have any questions, it's easy to contact me. My contact information is right there on the page.
And it will also be in the podcast block below. So definitely reach out to him. And thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe and like both to the YouTube as well as to the podcast. And thank you so much for being on. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.